The 14th year of Chenghua. Chapter 44. Popular. Tang Fan was bedridden for a full half-month, where Suizhou thereby came to learn of his popularity. His popularity with those that had placed as palace honorates of the same year as Tang Fan didn't need to be explained. The majority of them had since been assigned to posts far away from the capital, while the scant best of them were presently simmering their qualifications as they stayed in Hanlin Imperial Academy. To be able to simmer in that division was an honor. Not everyone was as dumb as Tang Fan, who transferred out of it. Within this half a month, about 5 people of Tang Fan's fellow palace honorates of the same year had come to see him in succession. Amongst them was the prime scorer Xie Qian and his group. That was already quite a large number of people. Since Tang Fan did not have a higher status, it would be impossible for him to be universally loved. Officials in the capital were impoverished, too, and those that weren't too familiar with him would have had to bring gifts upon visiting him. If they couldn't afford those, they simply wouldn't come and would instead send cards of respects to convey their kind regards. There was also the Shuntian prefecture where he currently worked. Magistrate Wei Yu and verifier Du Zhang had come to see him. They had not been seated long when they had also brought out well-wishes cards from various prefects, the bailiff Lao Wang and several other such people. From the Northern Administrative Court Division, Xueling, who Tang Fan was familiar with, had also visited, bringing Peng Qi along. Those two should have done it more on the basis of the friendship between Tang Fan and Suizhou. Getting in good graces with their superior's friend was tantamount to indirectly currying favor with said superior, so that connection amongst them was very understandable. However, Lao Shui was an extremely funny man that talked a lot, completely unlike his immediate superior. He had sat with Tang Fan for a very long time, and the sound of laughter in Tang Fan's room then hadn't ever stopped. Master Tang's voice had become hoarse from illness though. He coughed whenever he laughed, which made him sound like a quacking duck, very much not in line with the current ambience. On top of that, Suizhou had been staring coldly at them from the side the entire time. His eyes conveyed the message that they were hindering Tang Fan's recovery. In the end, Xueling became unable to sit still and had fled, dragging Peng Qi the second he tossed his gift over. Notably, after them inevitably came Eunuch Wang of the Western Depot. Wang Ji was supposedly up to his ears in workload right now. He should be busy wrangling with major imperial officials over his northern expedition, as well as busy investigating the possible mysterious person that had colluded with Fu Rou. However, that didn't at all prevent him from occasionally sending his subordinates over. Had Tang Fan been one of the 6 ministers or a cabinet ministers or even a major figure at the emperor's side, it wouldn't have been strange for an unending string of people to come visit him while he was homebound with sickness. The issue here was that he was currently nothing more than a trifling prefect of the 6th rank. Everyone coming to visit him was wanting to forge a good relationship by getting into contact with him, at most, or doing it out of friendship rather than thinking to get something out of him. From all that, it was obvious how popular he was. The people from Western Depot came to visit on behalf of their chief eunuch's order. Whenever they came bearing gifts. Judging by how awful Suizhou's icy complexion gets whenever it happened, Tang Fan got the feelings that Eunuch Wang was deliberately doing it to ruffle the man. But come to think of it, those two didn't seem to have any sort of enmity though. Was it just because the Western Depot and the Jinyu mutually hated to see each other? Taking everything in consideration, Tang Fan found an opportunity to bring something up to Suizhou. Before I'm fully well, how about I find a house and move out? Having not anticipated that he would propose something like that, Suizhou creased his brows and asked, "Why? We're friends, and you let Dong and I stay for free, but this is still your place, after all. My friends and co-workers have constantly been coming and going, which isn't great for you. I'm sure that disturbs your..." "It doesn't." Whatever else Tang Fan had wanted to say was halted by Suizhou, who then asked a completely unrelated question: "In your opinion, is Wang Ji a friend or a co-worker?" The other was slightly taken aback. "Neither." Suizhou was a bit surprised. Why do you say that? Friends will act candidly with each other, treat each other with sincerity and take blades for each other. Were Wang Ji and I actually friends, there would be less times where trouble is ignited. As you can see, me living in your house right now is practically a dove taking up a magpie's nest. If you ask me to go live at Wang Ji's house even just to test it out, I definitely wouldn't. Relations between major officials and eunuchs in this empire was not a rare thing, but one had to worry about their effects. For those like Huayan, it would be fine. For one like Wang Ji, both upright and heinous, the reputation of those he had in contact with could easily be influenced, and whenever that reputation went rotten, there would be no future for that official. Suizhou had asked his question precisely because of their closeness that he had witnessed the last time. Seeing that Tang Fan's mind was currently sober and not under influence of anything, he nodded in satisfaction. Then he said, "Don't bring up moving out anymore, then. You don't have to bring it up later, either." Master Tang hesitated. "But if you want, this can be your home from now on." Tang Fan was a little touched. Suizhou patted him on the shoulder. "We haven't known each other long, but the depths of friendships have never been calculated based on the durations. Once you have each other's regards, you're friends. You were born to do great things. Do not care too much about unnecessary things. If you move out, you might get vexed over rent or some other issues someday, so you may as well just live here in peace. I won't be getting married for a few years, no need to worry about that. Moreover, with my status, there won't be any night thieves bold enough to break into my property. You staying here will put me more at ease." General Sui Beihu was not a clumsy talker at all, he just didn't like to talk much. However, once he really started talking, the effect was 100 times stronger than those who were ordinarily of lustrous glib. Master Tang was indeed moved to shambles, his ever-finely eloquent self was suddenly lost for words. Seizing this opportunity, Suizhou handed over the medicine he was holding. Master Tang, who was looking at him with overwhelming gratitude and brotherly affection, took it without thinking, then tilted his head back and downed it like it was regular water. Then his face completely twisted up. "What the hell, you really take advantage when people lowered their guard, Sui Guangchuan." Catching sight of his accusatory expression, a faint smile appeared in Suizhou's eyes. He took back the empty bowl, then went to feed him an osmanthus candy, as if he were placating a tiny animal. Livid, Master Tang turned his face away, expressing that he didn't appreciate this at all. Suizhou didn't mind at all. He took his hand back to put the candy straight into his own mouth. "Tang Fan." Right as Suizhou left, Dong came in on his heels. "Gag, another person has come to visit you." Tang Fan had been busy dealing with visitors lately, which was making him more tired than if he was just getting off from work on a normal day. "Go on out and say that I've already gone to sleep from taking my medicine, then have him leave his name. I'll go drop by to thank him some other day." Dong agreed, but right as she turned to leave, the visitor had eagerly let himself in, an impatient voice sounding out in his wake. "You're so unkind, Runking. You're obviously not sleeping." "Tang Fan." "Sir, why are you breaking the rules? How can you barge into someone else's room without asking?" Pan Ben was still in his official's uniform. Noticing the other's contorted and strange gaze, he waved his hand and said, all right. I came today because I have something to discuss with you. Brother, I'll be able to go back to the bureau in a couple days. There's nothing that can't wait to be talked about until then," Tang Fan answered helplessly. "You already sent Wei Yu and the others to visit, so you didn't have to make the trip here yourself. Dong, quickly get tea for him. This is Master Pan Ben, prefect of the Shuntian prefecture, as well as our benefactor." Dong had the typical mentality of a common person. In the face of the all-powerful eunuch Wang, she had no sort of special reaction, but when she heard benefactor, she got speechless. After sizing up Pan Ben for a good minute like he was a rare creature, she noisily bounded off to Bruti. Pan Ben didn't bother with minding her at all. He sat down on a chair beside the bed and spoke anxiously. Runking, our mentor might be suffering calamity. Tang Fan was caught off guard. Why did you say that? He quickly questioned. Wang Ji had sent a memorial up a few days ago requesting the reclaiming of the Great Bend. You know about that, right? He nodded. Not only did he know about it, but Wang Ji had even sought him out to discuss it beforehand. I heard that the entire court was very opposed to it. Even His Majesty, who wholly favors him, rejected it, yet he still wasn't willing to give up on it. 2 days back, there happened to be news of Tartars invading the northern border and he presented a memorial requesting to engage them, proposing that he himself be sent over there. At exactly this moment, someone came in with tea and handed it to him. Without looking at them, Pan Ben accepted it, then took a sip, but with one inadvertent glance, he nearly spat it back out. The one who had brought him the tea wasn't that little girl he had just seen but Suizhou, who was in his Chenghua uniform. General Sui Bei, who was in an autumn-colored, fully embroidered penyesa, a spring-gilt saber at his waist as he stood in the room. Pan Ben was fine when he hadn't seen him, but as soon as he had, his scalp promptly went numb and he couldn't sit still. Despite of his own official's position plainly being a lot higher than Suizhou's, he quickly stood, smiling dryly. You're Sui, yes, good man? I've heard Runking talk about you many times. Now that I've seen you today, you really do look talented. Suizhou nodded, setting the tea set down. You two can talk. I have to go the Northern Administration Court Division. With how he spoke, it was plain to see that he regarded Pan Ben as someone beneath him. Pan Ben himself found that to be reasonable, not detecting anything amiss. Yes, yes. Go on ahead. However, Suizhou took only a few steps before he paused to speak to him again. Sir, Runking just took his medicine. He will likely go to sleep soon. His implicit meaning being, you can't talk for too long. What could Pan Ben still say other than fine with a stiff face? Once Suizhou was gone, Pan Ben finally let out a sigh of relief. He then snapped out of it, feeling that his recent display was a bit humiliating. There were more important matters before him, though. What were we just talking about? Wang Ji petitioning for war, Tang Fan reminded. Right. The majority of those in court don't advocate for war, yet there are still some that supported Wang Ji, which resulted in the two sides starting to fight. This hadn't been any of our business, but upon watching His Majesty's stance somewhat slacken like he was about to approve of Wang Ji's campaign, a group has now sent denouncements of Wang Ji upwards. They stated that he was striving for grandiose merits, wanting to engage in war for selfish desires which was certain to wipe the great Ming's treasury clean. They've also said that as a eunuch intending to dip his finger into military power, he's repeating Wang Zhen's prior disastrous idea. He talked on and on for a good while, yet Tang Fan didn't interrupt him before he got to the main point, since he could see a bit of the political situation out of the contents of his words. Wang Ji was the director of the Western Depot and also had the emperor and the consort's favor. Like a crab, any path he scuttled across would have every official in it pushed to the side by him. When he had stuck his hands into the case of the Marquis of Wuan estate, he had exerted his influence within the nobility. At the moment, he seemed to be unbridled, but actually wasn't so much, as he was still facing many restrictions with the emperor at the top. Ever since the founding of the Ming Dynasty, the Chenghua court had been a comparatively odd reign. Why? Well, the emperor didn't want to work and the cabinet ministers beneath him were not powerful enough to think of throwing him away in order to assume charge and propel the nation up. Everyone merely thought to tightly hug the thighs of the emperor and the consort, then be satisfied with muddling through life. This was how Chenghua was ultimately still in control of the government, and since emperors were emperors, he had a regent's designs.
fostering people like Wang Zhi, Shang Ming, and Wan Tong to stand off against civil officials, thus set up a balancing tactic that some past monarchs had been fond of. However, Chenghua wasn't a very steadfast person, so his decisions would always sway from side to side, like right now. He had been unwilling to go to war at first, hence why he had rejected Wang Zhi's suggestion in taking back the Great Bend. The major officials under him had all observed the way the wind was blowing, then stepped up to defy Wang Zhi. But, as Wang Zhi had said many times before, the emperor would begin to daydream about what would happen if the war was won. What monarch didn't like to expand their own territory? Such was why Chenghua's decision had started to waver. A portion of the officials that closely followed his footsteps followed suit, now agreeing with Wang Zhi. Another portion did not, continuing to oppose him. On top of that, ever since Yingzong's capture, the empire did not have the confidence it had in its earlier years. The concept of keeping watch for danger preoccupied the atmosphere in the court, and many would prefer peace negotiations over engaging in battle. To sum it up, all were accustomed to lives of ease and feared that after the Tartars were enraged, there would be a repeat of the tragedy of the Tuma crisis. Of course, there was also a section of upstanding men that refused to see eunuchs like Wang Zhi hold military power or just opposed war in and of itself, and they accordingly presented memorials of objection. Among them was Tang Fan and Pan Bin's mentor, Qiu Jun. In spite of not being an official, he still had the authority to present memorials. He had opposed the expedition, especially in regards to Wang Zhi stepping forth, as he believed that he was continuously inciting the emperor into war purely to gain for military merits. Which was exactly what Wang Zhi was doing. 2 days ago, Chenghua had agreed to Wang Zhi's proposal at last. He appointed the left capital censor of the inspectorate as governor of military affairs by means of the Minister of War's title, the Duke of Bao, Zhu Yang, as deputy commander and Wang Zhi as military supervisor. They were to lead troops for the Great Bend's area, oversee the enemy's positions, and if border invaders were to come across, strike at their discretion. Oversee enemy positions was really too gentle a phrase, considering that it was a consent for Wang Zhi to go and fight. In any case, the emperor would be far away from that place, and Wang Yu would be the main faction sharpening his blade. He would never collude with Wang Zhi, so they were allowed to do whatever they wanted to. Thus, came the problem. As the emperor had already changed his mind, the objectors knew that their dissuasion had no effect and gradually came to set down their banners. Qiu Jun alone persisted with memorials, his words getting all the more intense, to the extent that he even made quite insulting remarks towards Wang Zhi. This ended up angering the emperor, who waved his hand to have the old man pack his bags and take up office in Nanjing. Explaining up to this point, Pan Bin sighed. This mentor of ours really doesn't give it a rest. He isn't even an official, so what was he doing, getting involved? Was peacefully acting as a chancellor in the Imperial Hanlin Academy not good enough? It's going to be real great for him now, acting as an official in Nanjing. It sounds nice to talk about, since being the right assistant minister of revenue would be a full grade of promotion, but who doesn't know that Nanjing is an area for retirement? If he goes there, how could he ever expect to return to the capital one day? The Yongle emperor had shifted the capital to Beijing, thus moving the empire's troop there as well, but Nanjing had kept its full set of 6 ministries, being regarded as a provisional capital. The issue was that, from that point on, it had no authority over finances nor over appointing officials 7th rank or higher. It was basically a bulk arranged into a nice-looking flower shelf. For that reason, officials that got dispatched to Nanjing were generally either ones up there in both age and virtue, where the emperor was reluctant to make them retire but also found it bad to make them overtired, thus letting them live out old age in Nanjing, or like Le Shiqiu, who had offended the emperor and was getting sent there to feed the mosquitoes. If one received a wage yet didn't work, they had no power. Sitting within an unfrequented bureau was akin to an early retirement. Going there was essentially saying goodbye to one's own political career, with the odds of getting reinstated by the emperor being next to none. Why else would Pan Bin have dashed over to seek Tang Fan out? Nevertheless, Tang Fan had a bit of a guilty conscience. He himself had been the one to encourage Wang Zhi to suggest this to the emperor. Even if he wasn't the main culprit, nor even an accomplice, he had somehow ended up pushing his own mentor into a pit. How about you convince him to write a new memorial admitting his errors to His Majesty? The emperor has always been soft-hearted, so he'll surely forgive him. He holds you in the highest of regards. Your words would have the most effect. Pan Bin pleaded. Tang Fan shook his head. You must know how our mentor's personality is. If he was a people pleaser, how could he still only be a chancellor with his knowledge? Hearing that, Pan Bin looked even more troubled. In their community of government officials, mentors and disciples were like fathers and sons. The mentor should have been looking after his disciples, yet that situation had been turned around on them. He had to mentally grumble that Chenghua Shi was way too troublesome, but they were still mentor and disciple, no matter what. If he could help out, he would certainly do so. Tang Fan was also remorseful, having wholly not expected that this would wind back around to him. How about this, tomorrow, I'll go to his place and urge him to see if I can change his mind, he said, but actually held no hope. All right, I'll go with you. I can't just watch him get pseudo-promotion like this. Qiu Jun had quite some academic accomplishments, along with many disciples. Some had been from when he was authenticating provincial exams, such as Pan Bin. Some had visited him to ask to be his disciple because they admired his knowledge. There were others still that had reminded him of himself, and thus he had proposed taking them in on his own initiative, like Tang Fan. Amongst all of them, the ones most accomplished nowadays were Pan Bin and Tang Fan. The personalities of the mentor and his two disciples all sharply differed from each other, however. Qiu Jun was unyielding and narrow-minded, liable to break from being too rigid. Pan Bin was sly and world-wise but often overdid the second bit, liable to be compromising to the ways of the world. Only Tang Fan kept fixed principles in his heart but was still willing to appear a bit malleable in front of other people. This matched up with the noble's honesty and mildness, affecting squareness on the outside, yet roundness on the inside. Although Qiu Jun's disposition was not too perfect, he was at least aware of his own shortcomings. He admired the temperament of his youngest disciple very much. Him accepting him as a disciple back in the day had stemmed from the conduct and motive he could make out from his essays and calligraphy. The reason Tang Fan had been able to discern the crowned prince's personality from his writings was precisely because he had learned this trick from his mentor. Tang Fan's rank was too low, so no one would care if he submitted a memorial begging for leniency for his mentor. If Pan Bin did it as a high true third rank, his memorial would still get submerged within a vast swathe of memorials, completely disappearing under subsequent scrolls. It might even get taken out to pad the leg of a cabinet person's desk. Yet, when all was said and done, this was down to Chenghua Shi himself. His disciples pleading on his behalf, no matter how passionate it was, would have no use if he himself refused to cooperate, then ran off to oppose it again. After agreeing to their next course of action, they made an appointment to leave at dawn of the next day and proceeded to Qiu Jun's estate. The Qiu family was in the middle of packing up their luggage for the trip to Nanjing. Though they had said they were going to persuade him, Pan Bin and Tang Fan knew on the inside how stubborn Chenghua Shi was. It would be difficult to change his mind. Winter was coming soon. The lands in the north were cold and dry while the south side was warm and humid. Pan Bin had brought a few bottles of medicinal wine that could dispel rheumatism for his mentor, while Tang Fan had brought some pastries for the Qiu children to enjoy. They had also bought some commonly used, ready-made pills, just in case they ever needed them on the road. Qiu Jun was happy to see them, hurriedly getting someone to make tea as he invited them to sit down. However, after hearing of their intentions, he barely had any interest to hear it out and waved them off. There's no need to speak more on this, I won't be changing my mind. A eunuch that knows nothing of military matters to begin with will be bringing troops up north to fight at random for a while, and when the time's right, he'll just randomly chop off some heads to fabricate merits for himself. This is nothing new. The Tuma crisis is still vivid in everyone's eyes, yet His Majesty has forgotten the lesson the late emperor had taught. Must Beijing be reconciled to a defensive fight yet again? One's academic success had nothing to do with their character, just as it had nothing to do with their personality. Qiu Jun was learned, but that didn't stop him from being short-tempered. Once he had set his mind on something, no one could persuade him otherwise. Pan Ben gave Tang Fan a look. Shufu, we disciples have something to say, but aren't sure if it's appropriate to, Tang Fan meandered. Qiu Jun glared at him, scolding him with a smile. Why are you acting well-behaved in front of me? Say what you have to say. Tang Fan smiled, then got serious. Eunuchs have been placed into important positions since the great ancestors' time. Leaving aside those like Zheng He and Ho Xian, there's currently Huayan, who can be considered a loyal minister. The emperor's assignment of eunuchs is a custom, and that fact won't change even when another Wang Zhen shows up. His Majesty's trust in eunuchs is greater than his trust in outer officials. That's one thing. Take the crowned prince for example. Him being able to wander the palace and survive by chance had solely been due to the various people in the palace shielding him. After he takes the throne, he will assuredly have more confidence in eunuchs. That's just human nature. Since eunuchs grasping power is an inevitability that neither you nor I can alter, if it wasn't Wang Zhi that was doing this, it would be someone else. Despite arresting and imprisoning many officials after he took control of the Western Depot, none of those people had been innocent commoners, which is already much better than the Eastern Depot. With the Western Depot balancing it out, the Eastern Depot doesn't dare to be too out of control. This can be seen as an advantage to having Wang Zhi. Furthermore, ever since the Tuma crisis, the great Ming's national power has been declining by the day. In previous eras, it wasn't afraid to strike first, but now it's too afraid to act even when someone beats on its door. If it goes on being like a tortoise that shrinks into its shell and refuses to fight, it will inevitably encourage foes to get overconfident, and give surrounding foreigners the impression that we're weak. Therefore, I believe that Wang Zhi's northern expedition is actually something necessary. You shouldn't have anger spoil your health over this, Shufu. He had believed these remarks to have reason and precedence. Qiu Jun still wouldn't agree, but he wouldn't be as riled up as before, at the bare minimum. Unexpectedly, Qiu Jun's face increasingly sank, and once he finished speaking, he shook his head. Runking, you've really let me down, he replied coldly. I had thought that even if you wouldn't petition to contend against this, you at least wouldn't oppose my viewpoint, yet you're actually standing on Wang Zhi's side. Do you even still have the strength of character to be a civil official? Yes, it is indeed commonplace for eunuchs of this empire to wield power, and the great ancestor had set a bad example. Look at recent years, though what good end comes from being close with a eunuch? Yu Suijun has a good relationship with Huayan, but even he doesn't dare to so openly oppose him up. You really are superior to your mentor. You just get more and more promising. The more he spoke, the angrier he got. You know that our nation's power is now lacking, and it can't fight even if it wants to. Provisions must march before the troops can move, and all this will cost piles of money. Does the treasury have that much right now? You speak so casually of war, but it's easy to invite a spirit in but hard to send it away. Once Wang Zhi is set free, him not killing several civilians to fabricate his contributions would be great by itself. Pan Ben hadn't expected that calling on his junior disciple would not only not soothe their teacher's temper but actually just fuel his fire. Calm down, he quickly said. But Qiu Jun was not yet done. Runking, with your personality, if you had just calmed your heart and studied well, you could have become a famed scholar of a generation. Instead, you had to leave the quiet place of the Imperial Hanlin Academy to toil in the outside world.
I heard that something happened in the palace and you got roped into it. Are you mixing in with Wang Ji now? Pan Ben did all he could to shoot Tang Fan a look so that he wouldn't say anything else that would enrage the old fellow. Tang Fan smiled bitterly. No. It's merely that while investigating my last case, I happened to get acquainted with him through a series of coincidences. He knew that I was a Shuntian prefect, so he had me go lend a hand, is all. Owing to it involving the imperial harem, all of what everyone knew about what had happened at the East Palace was that Han Fang's youngest son had died and the murderer was his eldest son, which was worthy of a spell of laments. The suspicions over Consort Wan had been cleared, so that mung bean lily soup went unmentioned by everybody. In regards to any other rumors, even if they had faintly circulated elsewhere, they ultimately went unverified and thus became mere hearsay. Tang Fan's merit in solving the case had left an impression on both His Majesty and the consort, but his contribution wasn't prominent to the outside world. Consort Wan was a special case. She had been infuriated at Tang Fan for questioning whether she was the instigator in front of everybody, after which she had furiously complained to the emperor that the man was careless and wouldn't be able to withstand the heavy responsibility. But then, Tang Fan had solved the case and scrubbed away the suspicions on her. That seemed to prove that he was an official with both courage and capability. She had been in power for so long, that it wasn't easy for her to place importance on others' fawning. This time, however, she owed him a huge favor. If she kept it in mind, his promotion would simply be a matter of when. Luckily, Qiu Jun didn't know this inside information. If he ever learned that one of his own students had inexplicably received the recognition of Consort Wan and Wang Ji, he would probably vomit out 3 sheng of blood. Tang Fan, of course, did not dare to mention that it was he who had suggested the northern expedition to Wang Ji, otherwise their mentor-disciple relationship would then likely be over. And, just like that, their meeting ended on bad terms. Qiu Jun was disappointed in the both of them, feeling that they had been in the bureaucracy for so long, that they had even lost their fundamental principles and had become like everyone else that only knew how to follow the crowd. When they came out of the Qiu estate, Pan Ben started grumbling. You shouldn't have argued with him. He could have just said whatever he wanted, and you could have just bear with it and not engaged with him. I didn't want this, either, Tang Fan answered powerlessly. I couldn't have known that he wouldn't hear a word of it. That's true. Why is he so outdated and obstinate? If he would just be a little bit accommodating, he wouldn't be a mere academy chancellor right now, with his knowledge and qualifications. Tang Fan said nothing. In all honesty, this meeting with Qiu Jun had been an immense blow to him. There were many officials like him that insisted on believing that they couldn't go to war, and it wasn't just to echo the emperor. They had all been terrified by the Tuma crisis, losing the drive they had from when the Great Ming was first established. If this went on and the court was full of nothing but a bunch of such officials, what would the future of the nation be? He had thought that with his mentor's knowledge, he ought to have been able to understand his opinion. However, Qiu Jun had not only disagreed with it but couldn't even comprehend it. They parted ways upon coming to the mouth of the street, where Pan Ben didn't neglect to urge him to come to the bureau for work tomorrow. Tang Fan then walked silently and alone down the street, none of the bustle before him entering his eyes. He was thinking, should I just focus on handling cases? Would interfering less with major imperial events be better? He was just a minor, 6th rank official, after all. Those things were all so far away from him. There was simply no need to make things difficult for his mentor over this. He should not care too much. Still, another voice was telling him that his viewpoint wasn't wrong. One had to persist with their own opinions and not easily draw back just because an elder disagreed. The ancestors had stated that those of low positions had never forgotten to worry over the country. He walked along absent-mindedly, but at some unknown point in time, a burst of noise and dispute came from behind him. Upon dazedly turning his head, he was suddenly faced with a fist swinging at him. End chapter.